Hello, everyone, and hello, Camdon. I am so happy to have you here as a guest today. And so, for everyone that's listening, Camden is a really good friend of mine. We met in Kansas City through a real synchronicities, actually. And he then moved to Puerto Rico, where he is sharing and teaching meditation, breathwork, and more, and really helping people through their spiritual journey. And so today we are getting together to talk a little bit about, our own lives and how Camden got to where he is right now and what he wants to share about his work and about everything else that comes up. So, yeah, thank you, Camden, so much for being here today. It is a pleasure to have you here and to talk to you and see where our conversation will guide us and take us. And yeah, maybe we can jump straight in and maybe you could talk just a little bit about your own spiritual awakening and how that was, when that was, what you remember from it.
Oh
It's a
man,
big
that's
topic.
yes, it's a big topic, and thank you for having me on, Maria. This is great. I always am down for like sharing my story and being able to help as many people as we can, because it does seem like this is a time where people are starting to ask deeper questions and I don't know, kind of dig through more information. It seems like 2020 was a big turning point in society where we see people that are leaving their jobs after they've been there for decades. We've seen relationships dissolve and we've seen the relationships strengthen. So anything I can do, in this time to be able to help people through this thing, I'm definitely all on board with that. But in terms of my story, I don't even know where to start. This whole thing has has just been quite the ride. But I guess I could start at the beginning just to give people a feel for who I am as a person, just kind of where I started. And I grew up, and I know this is going to be broadcast all over the world, but I'm here in the United States of America. I'm in Kansas City, Missouri is where I grew up, which is right in the heart of America, which is really interesting that we're talking about opening the heart. And I grew up in the heart of America. Yeah,
Yeah, I like that.
but my story is, you've seen this story on TV before, where there is, you have inner cities all over the United States. You have ghettos all over the world. And I grew up in the inner city. I grew up in the east side of Kansas City, which in the 80s and 90s would have been considered a pretty dangerous place to be. I would say during that time, a lot of gang violence, a lot of drugs and things like that. In fact, I can remember when I was a kid, this would have been like when I was in the ninth grade, that HBO, which is for people outside of the United States, they're a big cable network. They did a special on my neighborhood because of the number of murders that were in my neighborhood. And in that time, they called Kansas City the murder capital of the United States. So we're talking about a pretty rough environment, looking back on it. But being in it, it didn't feel, it was the only thing I knew. So what it offered me in terms of my spiritual path is it helped me to be able to develop my instincts much earlier in life, it seems, because, whenever you feel unsafe or whenever you're feeling like you need to be aware that things are happening around you, you start to develop a kind of a sixth sense. You start to develop ways to be able to perceive if this is a person I should be talking to, or if this is not a person I should be talking to. So looking back on that time, that I can see how that starts to open me up. I can also remember in high school, they were talking about in science class how we only use 10% of our brain, and the other 90%, I think they were calling it, dark matter or junk DNA, something that they couldn't explain it back then. And this is, in the 90s. And I remember being very intrigued, like, wow, I'm only using 10% of my brain and I'm able to do all of this. What about that other 90%? So that's another memory that I had that stuck with me all the way through my adulthood. And so as I've gone down this path, I've been able to live several lives. One story that really stands out to me, though, as in terms of my spiritual path, is I can remember when I was a kid, there was this place in Kansas City called the Plaza. Now, the Plaza is a really exclusive place in Kansas City. Kansas City's sister city is actually Barcelona, Spain.
Oh,
So
cool. Yeah, I didn't know
Barcelona
that.
is the sister to Kansas City. So when you look at the plaza, you'll see a lot of the architecture reflects a lot of, the culture there in Barcelona. And so the plaza is this beautiful place that has all these arching buildings, and you can shop outside. In fact, it was the first outdoor mall in America. A lot of people don't know that. And I can just remember walking down the street, and every Sunday, my mother, my brother, and I, we would go to a McDonald's that was down on the corner there on the plaza. And we would get they had like $1 cone. You could get a cone, and we would walk around the plaza and we would window shop. We would look in the windows and see, oh, wow, look at that. And we see all the beautiful Rolexes and, that type of place. And I can remember very distinctly that we were walking on one side of the street. And as I was walking as a child, I can remember looking down at my ice cream cone and looking at my mother and my brother's ice cream cone and thinking, our ice cream is melting and we're trying to eat it as fast as we could. I look across the street. It's another couple across the street with a family. They've got balloons in their hands because they went and bought shoes from this place called Steve's Shoes. And when you were a kid and you got shoes, they give you a balloon. And they had ice cream, but they had the good ice cream. They had like the gourmet stuff that you could get at, the place that sells a sorbet or something. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why is it that we have so many people that have so much and so many people that have so little? That was a huge question for me. And it was in that posing of that question that I'm here now. It sent me on this journey of understanding the question of why do we have so many people that have so much and so many that have so little? Now, back then, I was asking a financial question. I was equating what I was seeing to the difference being money. Because, in inner cities, if there's not a lot of money, people desire money. That makes sense. But what I found was that what is it that people have so little of anyway? And what I'm saying is because because of that question, I was able to be in finance for 13 years to actually, kind of use myself as a guinea pig to really understand. I said, well, if I want to know why people have so much and so many people have so little, why don't I go exactly to the place of origin of this? I remember a mentor told me, he said, if you want to, the bank robber said, why did you rob the bank? He said, that's where the money is. So I was like, well, maybe I should go into wealth management. And because that's where the money is, and maybe I can understand this question. So that career was purely an experiment to understand, this concept of having so much and having so little. And over that time period, I was able to interview some people that built Kansas City. I was able to have close relationships with folks that are multi-generational wealth and understand like sort of their philosophy behind all of this. And what I found out was this. I found out that no one over that 13-year career, that no one is immune from human suffering. I don't care if you've got 10 million, 100 million, a billion, 100,000, 1,000. We're all in the human experience. And it really was kind of, I was experiencing cognitive dissonance with some of these stories, because indeed, some of these stories were worse than some of the stories I knew about in my neighborhoods where I thought that this was the only place that existed. So as I began to wake up, I started to see that, wow, what we're living on the outside of us has much more to do with what's happening inside of us than it does what's happening outside of us. We can look at all the inequalities in the world and we can point to things to say that's not fair. But fundamentally, what we're talking about is a perpetuation of a culture of thinking that has created a world that people are living in. Mm-hmm. And indeed, we're all living in our own individual worlds via our minds. And that sent me on a whole path at the end of that career that said, well, wow, okay, I understand, actually the wealth is not the green money that we're talking about. The wealth is this kingdom within. It's this place that we can go, this origin of existence where everything appears, where everything becomes. If we can begin to know ourselves as that space, we begin to liberate ourselves from this suffering that I thought money would liberate us from. And that's where I am now, is this place where understanding that I am the person beyond the mind. I'm the person beyond the thinking. I'm the person beyond the body. I'm beyond family, beyond the environment that you're grown up in. You're that part of you that is you, is that part of you that's never died and it will never live. It just is. I had another teacher explain it to me this way. He says, there's a big difference between infinity and eternity. The human mind exists in infinity. Think about that figure 8. It's just eating itself. It's this constant cycle of thinking and being in the world. And we're constantly trying to think our way out of this box that we're creating for ourselves. And then there's this next step where we become eternal, we become infinite, which means that there's no ending, there's no beginning. It's a continuum that we are continuing on. And on that continuum, we know ourselves more and more and more. And the more we know ourselves, we can back out of the idea that our condition is tied to wealth or to family or to relationships. Indeed, it does play a part. But it puts us square in the driver's seat to say, hey, the more I get to know myself, my true essence, the person, the I that I am, the more latitude that I have for creation and the more latitude that I have to be able to lead by example in that sense to help others liberate themselves.
So it must have taken quite a bit of effort to get into your financial career that you've had, right? And then, right. And then there would have been a gradual process of where you realized that maybe this wasn't as fulfilling as you would have thought, or maybe this wasn't what you wanted to continue to do anymore. Maybe you can just explain people how, how these first sort of, inspiration or first insights came along of maybe there's more than this, or maybe I have finished this process of what I've been learning through this career. How was that for you?
That's a great question. Yeah, that was a great question, because usually, like when I'm talking about spirituality, it is pulled from my personal experience. And from my personal experience, it seems like we're on this path that's constantly unfolding. Meaning, let's say you're going through a tough time right now. The tough time is here because of the next scene that's up ahead. So if we can mindfully be in this rougher part, this part that's kind of beating us about the face a little bit, if we can be mindful about that, we've now put ourselves in position to really show up in that future now moment. So this story I'm going to tell you, this is where I learned this from. So when I worked for a company called Nordstrom years ago, and I loved that company. It was a great company, great retailer, and it was something that I did while I was in college, and it was just just a blessing to have that there. And I worked in the men's shoe department, so as you can imagine, being in a place like Nordstrom in Kansas City, you've got the who's who of people that come in there and want shoes. So you had Chiefs players and Royals players, you had financiers, you had CEOs of corporations. So I got to really sit with a lot of people in this question of why do people have so much and why do so many people have so little. So I'm here now, And so there was this personal customer that I had. His name was Errol Williamson, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying his name because I owe him a lot. He sat in front of me, and he was a very impressive man. And he said to me, he says, is this what you're doing, or is this a stepping stone being here at Nordstrom, or how is this? And I was just kind of talking to him about it, and he was like, I think you would do really good in my business. And I said, well, what kind of business are you in? And he's like, I'm a financial advisor. I was like, financial advisor. So again, we're on this path. The question of why so many people have so much and so little, that happened when I was a kid. And now here I am at age 21, 22. And this opportunity is here. And I'm like, really? You think I would do well there? I didn't know a stock from a bond. I didn't know the Dow Jones from Mrs. Jones. I didn't know nothing about money. And I said, well, that's interesting. And I said, well, yeah, if you think that it would be good. He was like, no, because you've got the qualities. And I'm gonna go there on these qualities. You got the qualities to be able to, be a part of this industry and make a meaningful contribution. And I'm like, okay, cool. So he puts me in contact with one of his friends who started his own firm, and he was looking for someone to groom. He told me to go over there, and in fact, no, he said, I'm going to give him your number. The guy ends up calling me at Nordstrom, and I'll never forget that I felt like, whoa, like it was like God himself came down and said, hey, I want you. So I go to his office, and it starts me on this journey of learning. It's just learning. Right. I'm just shadowing this man. I'm hanging out with his family. I mean, he really is gracious in his information, his time, his clients. I had an opportunity to get a free look at what this world was all about. And so that worked out pretty well. And I said, I do think I can do this financial advisor thing. That was about a 2 or 3 year period of time. And I said, yeah, I think I can do this. I think, and back then I was very mentally, that's why you hear me say, I think. I was very mentally driven. I was a very driven young man, very ambitious. And I was always like trying to stay ahead. So I'm thinking to myself, like, yes, I have the intellect to be able to do this at a high level. So then I go to college, and I would, while we're on the subject, I would recommend to anyone that's watching this is if you're not in college, good, because I don't recommend going until you really truly know what you're passionate about. And that's kind of the approach that I took. I said, I'm going to go to college, and I'm going to go specifically for this degree in economics so that I can be a wealth manager. That was the whole thing. So
that's cool.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see how this thing starts to inch up. So here's the manifestation part of it, because that's easy. I mean, people get out of high school, they go to college. I pay cash, people get scholarships, whatever. The manifestation comes in, and it's like, now you're in college. Camdon's in college. He's working hard. He's working full time. He's going to school. He's going to school full time. He's working full time, and he's asking himself, okay, I'm in college, but how do I actually do this? How do I actually get the attention of these places? Because not only did I want to be in wealth management, I wanted to be at one of the big firms. I wanted to be at Merrill Lynch, or I wanted to be at a Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs. Those are the names I was really looking at. And I knew that they were really attracted, it seems like back then, at least I thought, to the Ivy League people and this and that. And so I felt a sense of competition there. But I remember, I spent a lot of time in church, so I did have a faith background in that sense. I understood that there was a higher power. I did know that. So I always had a faith that I knew that I was being pointed in a direction. Mm-hmm. And this direction was leading me, down this path where I am now. And while I was sitting there pondering that, my brother and I, now at the time, my brother he was a musician. He was doing music and things like that. And he really wanted to hit it big in music. And I really wanted to hit it big and become a financial advisor. I didn't want to go through all this trouble. And now I'm working, at XYZ firm, and I'm not doing anything. I wanted what I wanted, the vision that I had. And so we used to, on an ongoing basis, probably for a year or two, I used to call him, he was hip hop rap. I used to call him Rap Star, and he used to call me Money Man. So we would refer to each other as Rap Star, Money Man, Rap Star, Money Man. And it becomes, if you think about manifestation, it starts to almost become a mantra, because he's a reminder of where the ship is pointed. And it's a reminder of, is this really where I want to be? Or is this where society wants me to be? Am I trying to just play a character or role that's not necessarily beneficial? And I knew that I really want to do this. 2 years later, I'm sitting in Morgan Stanley, and the guy was like, yeah, I think we'll go ahead and do this. We'll go ahead and pull this off, and we're going to hire you. And I'll never forget driving home, on the highway, like, holy moly, like, we made this happen. This is crazy. Like, if you look at statistically how this was supposed to go, it wasn't supposed to go that way. Now, I didn't really know what happened then. I didn't know. I just thought it was God's favor. I had no idea. But what I know now is that what manifestation really is living living in the future now. It's living now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's go there. You want to go there?
Yeah, let's go there. That's yes.
Yeah, because I think it's really living in the future now, because there, and I was talking to a friend about this yesterday. You go out to YouTube right now, and I know there's a whole lot of people out there that's typing in manifestation, because times are hard. We're looking for a way out. We're looking for a way to make things happen. And it's like, sometimes you get to a place where like, maybe I can manifest it. And then people say, well, manifestation doesn't work. Like, this is woo-woo stuff and things. And it's like, yes, in a vacuum, if you look at the concept of manifestation, and you just go straight to a video and they're talking about this subject called manifestation, you have no context. If you had knowledge of yourself, if you understood that you're that silent space that everything arises out of, manifestation starts to make a whole lot more sense. Because when I started to understand that I was that silent space of awareness, to really experience myself as the silence, I was able to then see thoughts forming. You can see how the thoughts start to sort of appear, and you can see how they disappear. So all manifestation is understanding that you're the silence, and then consciously choosing what you want to appear in your field. What you want it's not happenstance anymore. It's not the monkey mind anymore, but it's this very disciplined, meditative mind that allows for this thought form to appear. And then when that thought form appears, you assign a nervous system response to it, or we can call that an emotion. And then from there, being satisfied with that. See, most people call manifestation what we can see and touch and feel out here. But actually, the first manifestation is what you can see and feel and touch in here. Mm-hmm. And when that can be enough, then the outside unfolds. That's the context that I've learned through this path. So I've got scars all over me thinking I'm manifesting clients and finance and everything. Unbeknownst to me, I'm working my butt off. Trying to make things happen. Here, I start to realize how worthy I am, how I am part of this much larger system that is here to be in harmony with me. So it's really like we're the only ones not showing up to the party. We're in dissonance with the overall system. And by becoming mindful and being in that silence and being aware of your silence, aware of that awareness, now things start to run in a cycle that's a lot more harmonious. So that's kind of my story as it relates to the finance and how I learned that.
Yeah, so basically about manifesting. So what happens often is that we repeat the past unconsciously, right? Because that's what we expect to happen for our future as well. So it's the predictable past repeating in the future as well. And so when you speak about the silence, I think that's very important for people who are kind of new to this sort of concept. I would say that to some degree we are manifesting already every day. We're just manifesting what we think we are worthy of, right? And what we have experienced in the past. And so what we think will be the most likely future. And very often, there's exceptions and there's different concepts to this, but very often this is what happens for our future. And so getting rid of the obstacles that stand in the way between us and the future that we actually want, we need to arrive in that silence that you talk about to become aware of, like, I am not the conditioning that I have experienced in my life. I'm not the patterns that I am living through. I'm not that sort of identity that I was assigned to maybe from outside as well. And so in that silence, then we can start creating the life that we want from the inside out, rather than reacting constantly just on what is coming inside from the outside. So it's starting to create that from the inside. And, the way the story you told about you and your brother calling yourself what you want to be in the future is already acknowledging that sort of reality from the future in the now, instead of feeling like you would not be worthy to call each other these names, because you assume that the future should be the same way that your past has already been or your present is right now. Isn't that, would you feel like that is a way to explain it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other part there too is and you hear people say it all the time, but hopefully with this background that I just gave the audience, this makes more sense. We are indeed spirits occupying a human body. It's not the other way around. It's called human being.
Right.
The problem is we're humaning too much. We got too much humaning going on and not enough being. And so what meditation offers is kind of this balance or this homeostasis between the human and the being. And it's interesting because I feel like in my story, a lot of my disbelief on my path had to do with worthiness, had to do with I couldn't be this exalted. I couldn't be this special. I couldn't, be this worthy. There's no way, look around us. We're building monuments to people that suffered the most. And we crucify the people that are speaking the peace and the openness and the awareness piece of it. So no one's saying not to work. Working is part of it, but it's in this mindful place that we're able to have predictable outcomes that are really designed to support us on our path long term, as opposed to these lessons that we have to keep learning over and over and over again. So I 100% agree with you there. And it seems like every day the truth becomes more apparent. What I'm learning about spirituality is that this is a play you run every day, and you get up, you do your practice, and you do it over and over and over and over again, not because you're trying to cherry pick an outcome, but because it takes you to your natural place. We can't expect a natural reality without being in our natural place, so becoming very familiar with how it feels to be yourself, so that when you've departed from it, so you can get back on track. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I feel like what you're describing is a lot of us are very overstimulated, and the monkey mind that we've been talking about, that constant chatter that is going on. And so it's so crucial for us to disconnect from that and return to stillness and calmness, because that's where we find a glimpse of a sense of everything is okay already. That's one of it, and just that homeostasis that you're talking about. And that is the fertile soil for creating the future that is not only going to be most beneficial to us, but everyone around us as well.
Sure.
Yeah,
and you brought up something real good there. You brought in the mind, and that was another place that really intrigued me on this path. And as I've gotten deeper into this path, I have come across a lot of information, some by revelation and some just through scholarship of just being very curious. Like, this whole path is just so amazing to me. It's mind-boggling how life can change so fast. But there's some information that's been out there for eons through what's called the Hermetic philosophy, which reflects the philosophy of a lot of the Greek mythology. Hermes was a Greek philosopher that was known for his thought. It actually goes back to ancient Kemet in Egypt, through this character in mythology called Thoth. Thoth is where the word thought comes from. So the original thought came from this god Thoth in this mythology, which when the Romans took over, it became Greek mythology. But the point is that they have broken down and they have on the hieroglyphs on the pyramids the nature of us as human beings, and they break down the characteristics of the mind. And you talk about the busyness of the mind. Well, actually, the thing is we're fighting against, a lot of times I found myself fighting against a part of me that was just doing what it's designed to do. It's designed to take in these impressions. It's designed to record everything that you're experiencing. Why? Because going back to that infinity sign, when we're in this circular sort of life where we're constantly reliving the same moment over and over again in terms of these themes that we have in our life, the reason why that happens is because we're solely reliant on the mind. The mind can only give you an answer from the input that's there. The only thing that's there is the past. So what the Hermetic philosophy talks about is this idea of the law of rhythm, where it's saying that the mind is on a pendulum almost, where it's always the nature of it is to go positive, negative, positive, negative. So it's not that the mind is doing anything wrong. It's just that the knowledge that we have of ourselves puts us in a defensive position. So it's not ADHD. It's not depression. You understand what I'm saying? It's these things when we don't have knowledge of who we are. And so we go to a source outside of us to get an answer. But when we do start to understand who we are, and we understand that the mind is just on this pendulum, we now can just witness the pendulum.
Yeah,
watch
exactly.
it as the person that you are, just like you would watch a pendulum on your desk. So now you're taming the mind by calling the mind out. Well, people are probably going to say, well, what do you mean by that? Most people, I used to think that I was my mind. So here's how I broke that. I said to myself, without referring to the past or projecting into the future, who are you? And that question, when pondered, will leave us in this silence. And from there, we're able to start to rebuild. So you're saying to me, Camdon, that these thoughts aren't me? No, they're not you, but they're creating the you. They're not you. You have much more dominion over yourself. You're the creator of yourself. Okay, so you're not, so we talk about codependency, and outside of us, you know, how we have these codependent relationships and they get all entangled and everything. But actually the thoughts have a codependent relationship with us because they need our engagement to exist. Mm-hmm. But with our active engagement, our mindful engagement, we're able to use the mind for what it is there for, which is to create critical thought creation. So yeah, that was a huge part that I learned, you know, on this path, and I hope that helps someone.
Yeah, I remember when I, learned about that, because that's not something that we learn through our school system, that we are not our thoughts and that we are able to observe our thoughts, and that just gives such a level of freedom back to us, and also just the realization that, okay, cool, if I'm not my thoughts, that means I can choose which of my thoughts I want to believe, and I can also create thoughts better because I'm not the thought, I'm the one that is observing them or choosing them or even creating them. And when we go back to manifestations, that is in a way creating those thoughts and giving them power through our emotion and believing in them so strongly that we're actually attracting that specific future towards us.
Yes. And then there's going to be some that say, and see, the thing is, and for anyone that's listening to this and they're brand new to these concepts, all of this is experiential. So one big headwind that's going to be here is if you have not experienced this place of silence that we're speaking of, then it's going to be hard to ground this message. But I would encourage you to in your curiosity to go on that path to find out, for yourself. But this idea of manifestation goes another step, where there's going to be some that's going to argue, and I would even argue some of this in my experience, that it isn't really necessary in some instances to consciously create thoughts. In that silence is a path. And that silence is already a path. It feels like we feel like we have more choice because of the great job TV and propaganda did on us. I didn't come into this body wanting a Rolls Royce. I was sold the idea that I wanted to have that I needed a Rolls Royce. Similarly, you know, you come into this body with a set of a set of activities or a set of experiences that are there to raise humanity in that sense. So you can make an argument that as long as you abide in the silence, that whatever is your natural path will appear. And I've witnessed this in my life as well. So you have on one hand this very conscious, thought-driven way of manifesting. And then there's this very organic, truthful, in quotes, sort of path that opens up in the silence. I think both of them are very enjoyable, but I think it's important to say that I feel that both of those are there for people.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like the second one that you described, in my own experience, I would call just trusting the universe, or just trusting in myself that whatever comes along will be good. And very often I was surprised by, you know, being met with experiences that would have been way better than I would have experienced, or would have been able to think about or manifest in that sense. So that definitely comes, but it comes with the right emotion of trust, or even surrender to some degree.
Sure.
And just the feeling of general everything will be okay-ness. There's a balance though. I feel like there needs to be a bit of both, you know, but I've definitely had experiences in my life where I felt like I'm just flowing, and it was flowing pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and you brought up a few comments back. You were talking about, you kind of brought up trauma and that. And as we're talking about manifestation here, that to me, that's what's in our way. That's what was in my way. It was this idea that I was so numb to my emotions, to my thoughts, that I was not aware of these, what I'm calling blockages.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at consciousness that we are, this awareness that I'm speaking of, I see it almost like, you know, think of it as like a circle. And in this circle, we have these lines that are like pathways. And this pathway is the pathway for wealth. And this pathway is for healthy relationships. And this pathway is for a healthy body. And when you were a kid, your mother told you that there wasn't enough money. And she said this every day: there's not enough money. We're not going to have enough money. How are we going to pay these bills? And so this story that's being overlaid in your consciousness, because we're unaware and because this is a part of this path, nobody's immune from this. This is a part of this path. So we're being downloaded with all of these untruths. And what that causes is in your wealth pathway, it causes a blockage.
Right.
And so the energy conservation says that all organisms have a finite amount of energy. We've only got so much energy in this body. So if we're constantly using that energy to shore up worries or shore up blames or shore up insecurities, then we have less energy to be creative with, that creative force that I'm talking about out of the silence. So the way I dealt with those blockages, because it became evident to me, because I was like, well, there's certain pathways where things are just flowing. And there's certain ones that it's not flowing at all. What I found out was we're getting into the area of what's called detoxification. And usually when I was hearing detoxification, I was hearing it more from a body point of view, like a physical body, your muscles, your intestine kind of thing. But also detoxification has to do with thought forms, because it's the thought forms that's driving all of our food decisions, is driving all of, you know, how the body works and things like that. The most detoxifying thing that you can do for the body, I found, is this concept of breath work, is what we're calling it in the West. Pranayama is what they're calling it in the East, you know, but this idea of conscious breathing. And what I found through conscious breathing, and I've been on this conscious breathing path for some years now, what I've learned is that what we're doing is it's almost like a snow globe. Like, think of a snow globe, and you got all this snow in the bottom of the globe, and you're in the globe, and you're like, yeah, everything's good. We're good. And then somebody comes along and shakes the snow globe. Now you're in what in the world is this? So you're agitated the snow. If the snow was always there, but it was just settled to the bottom. Breath work is gonna start to agitate and bring back that sensitivity to feel that this body is designed to do. And then you don't have to do nothing but keep breathing, and you're gonna have emotional releases that should have been done 15 years ago, 20 years ago, yesterday. It's just gonna happen because the body wants to make more room for the love. See, when we look at breath, breath means spirit. If you go look at the etymology of it. So actually, and if you look at ity, the suffix iti, that means the quality of. So to me, spirituality is the quality of the breath. The breath is what leads you into your true nature. To me, it couldn't be more simple than that for me. I mean, it's so beautiful. All you have to do is wake up and consciously breathe. And through that process, and yes, it's not an easy process, not saying that at all, but through this process, we begin to become reborn. You can't be reborn until you're willing to die. What are we talking about dying? We're talking about dying to the self, that personality that is feeding off of you. It's driving your decision because it wants to keep itself alive. When we see that that part of us is just a mask, this persona that we're presenting out here, when we make more room for love, we make more loving decisions. We have more loving thoughts. We have more loving aspirations, and life starts to change. And so I really wanted to get that in there about the breath work. And I know you've been into the breath for a long time too, Maria. What kind of experiences have you had?
Yeah, so I feel like the breath is the easiest way for us to, first of all, get closer to the subconscious mind. You know, that's kind of what you were talking about with the globe and snow in there, because a lot of our systems, they work either unconsciously or consciously. So for example, I cannot tell my digestion to digest. It will do that by itself. It's not a conscious decision. But then with thinking, I can change my thoughts, for example, or I can raise my arm. The breath happens unconsciously, happens automatically. We don't have to think about it, but we can think about it and we can change it. So it's something in between. And the breath will also always show us how we feel and the way we think. And it's very related to both of the body and the spirit and the mind. And so it is kind of the I'm looking for this one word, I don't know, but it's kind of like the one handle that we have to change all of it. So we can change our nervous system state through the breath. And if we calm down for the nervous system, if we regulate our nervous system, that will also calm down the thought. It's very hard to force to think differently, but it is a lot. And it's kind of really tough to tell our nervous system what to do. But through the breath, we have an anchor point there. And so that is one of the really good things, especially at first when you're new to a spiritual practice. I feel like it's so great to be able to just get out of a state of anxiousness or like lethargy or whatever it is. You can do that through the breath at first. And then with deeper breath work, it can bring up older traumas or stories, things that are buried deep inside of our psyche and body to be able to release that. And it is also a really great way for us to get deeper into meditation because it opens up that silence that we've been speaking about. So there's a lot of people that are like, oh man, like I really want to meditate, but I just can't. And then I always tell everyone then just start with the breath, because to this day, I still sit down and do my breath work before I get into meditation. Because I just feel like that is the most natural way for me to get there faster. And there are so many benefits to breath work that we haven't gotten touched on yet, but just health benefits, for example.
Sure. And I'd like to say, and the reason why I'm going to say this is because I've watched a lot of podcasts like we're doing, and I wish someone would say this, so I'm going to say it, that we're talking these concepts about the breath, and yes, the breath works. Yes, it is the most detoxifying thing you can do. It's you are the breath. There's no question. In my mind, there's no question. If there was an it that we are, the closest thing to it is the breath in a physical sense. And there are levels and degrees to healing. And sometimes a person is in a place of needing healing, and they may need something to start them off that's more tangible than the breath, something that's a little more grounded, something that's going to be more towards a therapy, something that's going to be more towards, sort of this, it may be more of a mental exercise. But what it does is it starts to introduce one to these concepts of which thought is me, of what trauma is, of how it's affecting your life. And it gives a context. Not everyone wants to go to the mountaintop and become self-realized. Some people, just want to have a happy life. Some people just want to be able to wake up with no anxiety in the morning. Some people just want to get over what happened to them in their childhood. So if you're watching this podcast, yes, we're talking spirituality, and the breath means spirit, and you are the breath, and all of that. But sometimes we have to get past those denser parts of us to be able to experience this part of us in its fullness. And I just feel like that needs to be said, because in this time that we're in right now, especially with the stock market doing what it's doing and employment rates like they are and stuff, I don't want to put people in a position to not have all the information. If you ask me, jump into the breath. That's what I did. That's how I got on track. But I want to also invite you to really assess what your needs are, and then start where you need to start. Hey, that story I told you about when I went to college and I had to, to get the degree in economics, I had to revisit algebra. I wasn't up to speed on that. It was a little time off work. So if I would have just started an algebra class, I would have been in over my head. Same thing here. It's okay to start off, here in this prerequisite phase of understanding of ourselves, and then sort of progress from there. All of these paths look different, but we're all worthy of the development that's there on the other side of the breath.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really, really good point. And I would probably add that, yeah, it's all equal, like you said, and sometimes we have different needs. And, yoga is a lot of movement that helps us to find the relationship to breathing at first. So that is something that is very beneficial for people to get into that. And sometimes it may be a massage that you get, or a hug from a person, or lying down on the earth and just putting one hand on your belly and feeling the breath down there. There's so many ways, and anything that helps you to feel more centered is the first, guiding point. There's no point doing a really intricate and difficult breath work that just puts you under pressure. If, for example, you can just go outside and take a walk and maybe hug a tree and feel better through that at first. So yeah, that's a really great point.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up yoga, because that's another big real revelation that I had in this process, and then I ended up having confirmation. It's weird how this all works, like when you really get in that silence. But this idea that the trauma is stored in the organs. Mm-hmm. And yoga, what's so great about yoga is it really addresses, from this place of this silence, now we can start to see the body as this vehicle that operates a certain way, that has a certain geometry to it, like a car. You go get a Tesla, the engine is here, and then 2 inches to the left is the battery, and 3 inches to the right. So it has its own geometry. The body has its own geometry, same way. And what yoga is doing is just taking advantage of that geometry in that sense. And don't let me overstate this, but it's taking the way I've experienced it is there's taking advantage of that geometry in the sense of there's this sacred sort of geometry that we can kind of move the body into to be able to access our higher nature. But the thing is these emotions that are stored in the organs. And I started thinking back, and I would encourage people to kind of just think about this consciously. Like, I had a lot of people that smoked around me when I was a kid, and just in my neighborhood and stuff. Well, it turns out that grief is stored in the lungs. And so I'm like, oh, wow. When I think back at those people, yes, they were grieving. They had a lot to grieve. Even if you take it to prisons and jails, they're trading cigarettes in that sense. So we're trading medicine in that sense, if you think about it that way. Or you think about how anger is in the liver. Have you ever heard of an angry drunk? you know.
Mhm.
So it's these telltale signs that the body is trying to send us signals that when we become more sensitive to it, it gives us clues in terms of where we need more healing and things like that. And going into the herbs and things like that. I don't know if that's for this podcast, but there are ways naturally to be able to release those things. And I love yoga as a tool to do that. Because I've seen some people's lives really transform with that. I've got a student right now that's diving into yoga, and it's really making a difference in her life in terms of her healing journey. So
yeah, that's a really good point. And the cool thing about being in 2022 as well is that there's so many different healing modalities that work in so many different ways, and so you can approach things from different perspectives. I just recently did a session called NET, where the practitioner checked my digestive system and then checked whether there's an emotional component why it wasn't running optimally. And yes, there was. And then she was able to check on different emotions that would have been stuck there, and then match that with something that happened in childhood. And then just through that insight, I was able to unlock that memory, unlock those emotions, really fully feel those emotions that at that time I was just stuffing away. And that cleared something, not just on an emotional level, but also on a physical level with my digestion. So that is just an example of sort of what you were talking about, interrelationship with that. Similar things have very much happened to me also through my yoga practice. And so it just really shows how the body, the mind, the breath, they're all so intercorrelated. And so we can approach things from different perspectives and maybe come to the same outcome then. Yeah, well, super exciting.
Yeah, you brought up some good point about digestion, and I've had quite the journey with food in my life. Part of my teachings has to do around nutrition. I feel like there's no separation between the body and who we are. It's a continuum, and to get people to this place where we can see ourselves as just whole. But I spent time when I was younger in the bodybuilding community. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but in that journey, I was able to really experiment with diet and stuff. And I've started to realize that there are diets. It seems to me that there are diets that support the physical body in a sense. So if you want it to be vibrant and alive, you eat a certain way. If you want to put on muscle, you eat a certain way. If you want to run a marathon, you eat a certain way. But then there's also diets that I've experienced where it's there to sort of support that more subtle body, that part of us that we can't see, like that, what they might call the spiritual body, or however, there's so many different definitions, but that part beyond us, the part beyond us is way more of us than this part that we see. And so what I've learned is like on the spiritual side, because I've been on the standard American diet. I've been on the bodybuilding diet with high carbs, low fat, high protein, high fat, low carb, high protein. I've been on, keto diet. I've done that. I've won competitions. I understand how diet works, and we can talk about that at some other point. But what I found out on the spiritual path is that this idea of detoxification is a physical thing as well. So we talk about the breath, and that's detoxifying. And then from there, you're going to find yourself, depending on how backed up you are in your intestines, you might find yourself in the bathroom quite a bit too. Because that breath, the diaphragm, is massaging the intestines. And so it's starting to stimulate. So just like you're agitating those thoughts, you're actually agitating the blockages, the physical blockages that came from the thoughts. Because what I learned was that I was an emotional eater. So if I were stressed out, instead of me going to go breathe, I would go get a Baconator. Mm-hmm. And so that karma of the Baconator is now in here because the body doesn't know what to do with it. And so what I've learned is that as we detoxify the body with certain diets, and normally that diet has to do with fresh fruits and vegetables, very electric foods, living foods, that sort of a thing. What I realized was and this is going to sound, I hope this hits the mark. What I realized was that I was experiencing less and less separation outside of me in the world. as I had less and less separation in my intestines. They say that the gut is your second brain. So
Yeah.
if the intestines are designed, by design, they're only this big around in diameter, but because of the waste we have in it, it's now this big around, and you got a beer belly. That is, to me, I'm representing as separation. That separation in your body internally, as above, so below, as within, so without. So externally, we experience that separation. But as we detoxify and we get back to our true nature, and the geometry of the body starts to become less swollen because of what we're eating, and it goes back to its natural geometry, I've experienced less separation and more wholeness, and that's now showing up in my life. So I guess I would challenge people to really take a strong look at diet. That's a path in and of itself. But why are you eating the foods? And are there more constructive ways to eliminate the mental strife that's maybe triggering that food choice? That's something that I learned, and it's amazing how that works. Like having less separation inside of this body equates to less separation out there, more harmony in here, more harmony out there, more clarity in here, more clarity out there. If you're eating life, you're gonna be living life. If you're eating death, it's that thing. The other one too that really rings home to me, that came to me, was if you have an egg, and there's a chicken in that egg, if the farmer goes to the egg and starts knocking on it to let the chicken out, that's called death. But the little chicken that's on the inside, when it breaks through the shell and reveals itself, that's called life. So life is lived from the inside out. And it's so many things that we're using outside of us that is not really designed to support us in terms of life. We are life itself. So by having this internal focus, it's amazing how many things outside of us are resolved by itself without any effort.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I know you have quite a bit of experience with fasting. Maybe you can tell people a little bit about that if someone's interested.
Yeah, fasting is big. I think it's an important part to look at. Of course, there's health benefits for the body when it comes to fasting. The biggest thing for when it comes to fasting, as far as I can see it, and I would encourage people to go out there and research it for themselves, because we won't be able to get all the way in the weeds on this. But this idea of autophagy, what fasting is doing is it's not only allowing the body to rest and digest. In other words, we're not using energy to digest more food. We're fasting from that, so that energy that would be used to digest food is now being used to move what's already in there. After a period of time of fasting, generally of about 72 hours, the body kicks into this zone called autophagy. And what it's doing is not only is it cleaning the blood, cleaning, the organs on the inside, it's cleaning you at a cellular level. So going back to healing, we're starting to heal a lot of trauma, multi-generational, or you might even call it ancestral trauma that may be in the body, that is in the body, through fasting. And now the fasting journey is a journey in and of itself. And it really takes having someone that knows what they're doing and has experience with this. I started fasting back in 2009, and I started with intermittent fasting. And intermittent fasting is basically where you pick a period of time during the day where you're not going to eat. And what I like to do is, when I first started, I just wouldn't eat breakfast. And then I would pick it up at lunch. And that was my intermittent fast. As time went on, I stopped eating breakfast and lunch. That might have been a year's journey or something, and I would just eat dinner. And then from there, I ended up saying, well, how about let's just fast on Mondays, and we'll eat dinner Tuesday through Sunday. So this is a progression. It's part of a path. But what it offers is it offers longevity. It offers vibrancy. It offers clarity. It offers energy. It offers a clear mind and body. It offers mindfulness to the extent of, when you're on a, let's say you're on a 48-hour fast, and you look up and you notice, hey, I'm not even hungry. and I haven't eaten in 2 days. I've only had water. I did a water fast. It really brings up the questions, what are those hunger pangs to begin with? Because you haven't eaten in 2 days. You haven't eaten in 5 days or whatever the fast is. What are those hunger pangs? And that we can go into what that could be. But not today, we won't do that. But what I'm trying to say is that it makes us mindful of the decisions that we're making. It just brings us more aware of how we're treating ourselves and the why behind things. And then perhaps it provides a space to make higher choices that supports you long term. So I love fasting. I would recommend it to anyone. In my family, we have a history of diabetes and high blood pressure and these kinds of things. I know that that's very pervasive in society today. I've even seen it in my own workplaces when I used to be in the professional life and things like that. People are, they may be making, things happen from a worldly point of view, but what's going into the body is just causing, more and more and more suffering. So I'd encourage everyone to really start to research this concept of intermittent fasting and long-term fasting and see the benefits there. And if you're having any trouble, let's say you have any ailments or any, pre-existing conditions that may not pair well with fasting, perhaps go see a nutritionist and see if there's a path for you. But I definitely would think is something you want to take a look at.
Yeah. Or maybe if you're feeling you're more of you have a more of a weak nature and you feel like you need food to regulate your blood sugar, then maybe I would suggest that you start with intermittent fasting, leave out dinner and have breakfast instead.
Yeah,
that's something that everyone can do, right? And start with that and then go from there.
Yeah, because I saw this graph, just me, again, so curious and kind of nerding out on this stuff. I saw a graph that showed the average height and weight of a man in America in 1960 was 5'9", 160. And that's the reported weight. So think about people that put on their driver's license their real weight. A lot of people don't put their real weight on their driver's license, not in the States. I know a lot of people that don't do that. So the reported weight, okay. In 2000, the average height and weight of an average male in America was 5'9", 210 pounds. Reported weight. Reported weight. Now, on the graph, it had it's kind of going like this, and then you kind of saw this parabolic shift. But what was that shift? That was the entrance of fast food. It was the entrance of Taco Bell, McDonald's, and these kinds of places like that. And because the food was fast and it was easy and people are busy, we're working as hard as we can, the kids seeing the commercials on TV, now this is what we're eating, and we're seeing, the obesity rates going up ever since that happened. And so it certainly is, food is the thing that is going to either make us vibrant or it's the thing that's going to make us feel more dull. And I would encourage people to want to be as vibrant as possible. And now in that vibrancy, and you're on this path, you're going to see a lot of things fall away. You're going to see a lot of things fall away, a lot of old habits. And because of those habits, a lot of friends, workplaces, spouses, ways of being, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to detox from your life. So understand what you're getting yourself into if you start taking this advice about fasting and breathing and all that, because it is going to change your life. But, you kind of have this tower event first where things start to kind of feel like they're falling apart in a sense. That's how I experienced it. But then to be reborn and to rebuild into this new and improved version, of Camdon or of Maria or the viewer.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I am on that.
Yeah, I always like that metaphor of having to rip down the house first to build up the new one, or, take out the kitchen cabinets first and deal with all the mess before you can bring in new ones. And that's just a natural progress, like the tower card that you mentioned before. Yeah, amazing. Camdon, is there anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, well, I guess I'd like to just add on to what you just said. It feels like in my experience, like when I went through that big tower event and life felt like it was falling apart, then I started to rebuild anew into my new self. Oh boy, did I lose it?
Yeah,
Trying to,
how it
were we?
felt, what it
Huh?
felt like to have that tower experience where things fell down,
Oh
and
yeah,
just
yeah.
made space for
So
new.
the tower event happens, and then you're rebuilding. But then what happens is that, well, I call it, you begin to gain understanding. What do I mean by that? Understanding. If we look at it, let's look at the body. Let's look at a house, and let's say you have this house that needs to be renovated. It's a beautiful home, but this first floor, we want to put marble floors down. We want to take that wall out and put in a fireplace. We want to put in a new kitchen and stuff. But before you start that new construction, what happens is that you go down in the basement and look up under the floor joist to gain understanding as to which joists are going to support this new project and which one is not. And so in this analogy, we're that home, and we are that contractor that goes and we look at aspects of us and ask if this is supportive of the new person that's becoming.
Yeah, I
And
love
if
that.
that aspect is not part of the new part of the new self that we're becoming, we can pull out that joist and we can tack in some new ones. But that tower event is necessary to make room for that mindfulness, to get the noise out the way. And now we can see things objectively and start to choose. See, and before the tower event, we were in reaction. We were reacting to everything. We were so traumatized. And frankly, that's how I was taught, was to react. Okay, through the world, just watching the world stage, this is like, don't let them take advantage of you. But as we, on the other side of that tower event, we're in choice, where we can look at the joist and say, resentment. Do I need this anymore? What can I replace resentment with? Can I replace it with love, expansiveness? Can I replace it with harmony, clarity? You start to be able to choose without judging anything. It's just a matter of fact way of looking at you as life and saying that this is a part of me that I got the memo on. I can take this lesson out of my backpack. I can just go on without it. And so that's the other thing that I've noticed after the tower event that we're talking about in this analogy, is that it makes room for this conscious look at who we are in the person. And then it puts us in position to become the ultimate, which for me would be becoming self-realized or understanding heaven on earth, or however you want to say that. That's what I'm interested in, and that's what I specialize in, helping people with. So
that is beautiful. Yeah, I really love that. And it kind of implies that self-responsibility that we take on, rather than, you said, reactive mode, like rather than being in victim mode, that self-empowerment of like, who do I want to be? What can I let go of? And, with resentment or being able to forgive, just the concept of that we are mainly doing that for ourselves and not so much for someone else. So it is really taking up charge for our own life. I love that.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned before that you're working with people. So if someone wants to work with you, how would they best get in touch? How would they best reach you? How would that look like?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. That's a great question. I'm on Instagram. So if you want to follow me on Instagram or send me a direct message on Instagram, it's inspired, INSPIRED, and then _nuggets 2.0. That's my Instagram. And then I have a YouTube page under Inspired Nuggets, no underscore. And on that YouTube page right now, I just started it, is a whole, I've got a series on there that describes who I am in depth. It goes into a lot of my story, a lot of the realizations that I've had. I've got a whole library that I'm uploading, strategically, but there's probably 15 or 20, probably 15 to 20 videos on there already for anyone that's interested in hearing more about my story. Also, I offer private consultations. Nuggets is the organization that I've started for this, and Nuggets has a consultation program called Conscious Consultations, which is a program that allows for sort of an alternative point of view on life's happenings. You know, there are people out there right now that just aren't satisfied with the typical proverbial reasoning behind why things happen. And so if you're on your healing journey, if you're interested in nutrition, if you're trying to figure out how to have better relationships, you want to know about breath work, meditation, these are all the things that are supported through conscious consultations. And then also I have a program they're privates that I do that are 90-minute sessions that are just a one-on-one session I do in person, or I can do it via Zoom. And those are customized to the person's needs at that point in time. So we're here to help people through this path. As I went through mine, and I'm still on it, but as I went through those parts where it was more that tower event, it was really me on my own doing this. And I'm glad that it was, because now I can serve at a high level in assisting others that are now meeting this place in their lives. So very excited to do that.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And I highly recommend, if this resonates with you, that you reach out to Camdon, because he's very inspiring and he's very much walking the talk. And yeah, I'm sure you would benefit greatly from it. So I will put everything of that into the show notes as well. So both the Instagram handle as well as YouTube, so you can find it easily, and you will find it down there. And yeah, I think this like nicely closes our conversation today. Thank you so much, Camdon, for being here and having had that conversation with me. And to everyone that's listening, thank you for listening as well. So any last words, Camdon, that you would like to add before we close this?
Well, I'd have to say, just to document this, that today is June 21st, and it's the solstice, the summer solstice. Yeah. And, you know, if we look at life, you know, we kind of, you know, you have, we're in the summertime now. So this is where everything is coming into bloom. And this is the time to be vibrant and alive and very creative. And then we have these cycles where we start to go into autumn, where parts of us are going to die off again. And then we're going to go into the winter of life. And so I want to just really remind everyone that the more that we're in that silence, the more we're synced up with these cycles. And these cycles are part of life. We're the only organism on the face of the earth that fights the cycle. We want to be in harmony with the cycle, not be stuck in summer. You don't want a perpetual summer. You need to have these cycles. The thing is, though, is that you want to be on the continuum and not in the infinity
hence
cycle.
The wheel.
Yeah. So yeah, just wanted to throw that out there just so we can document it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a very auspicious day today, and it's at least in the northern hemisphere, we have the most light of the day, and yeah, it's a great day today to just be conscious about nature and how it works and how it affects us on all the levels. Yeah. All right, thank you so much, Camdon. It was a pleasure having you here, and I'm gonna just say thank you again, and thank you to everyone listening.